The World Series is officially over, which means the offseason is here. Let's talk about it all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, November 1st, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome in, everybody. The offseason is officially underway, and there are already moves being made. Not really in Tigers land, at least at the time of this recording. I don't want to jinx it. Brian and I already had a show done, and then Yzerman made a trade for the Red Wings at like 11:15 p.m. So don't want to speak too soon here and jump the gun, but we already are seeing moves made around baseball. We already have a pretty sizable trade involving the Angels. So we will see what happens, but the offseason is here. So we're going to take a show, and especially Friday show, a little bit lighter heading into the weekend and whatnot, and just kind of lay out what the winter is going to look like. There have been a plethora of fantastic articles if you want to read, if you want to see the exact dates and whatnot. Evan Petzold of the Freep, I know, does off-season calendar every year. I also know Evan Woodbury of MLive does a fantastic off-season Tigers important dates calendar article every single year. I'd imagine that most of our beat writers will end up doing some sort of article like that, but I know the two Evans definitely are all over the dates and whatnot. So I use them as a source to help with this episode, and you should definitely go read and click on and support their fantastic work. They will go very, very in-depth as well in their writing. So we're going to just take a look at the calendar, talk about the important dates that you should be aware of, talk about what the Tigers' kind of initial outlook is on all of those dates. There are some that are very important to the Tigers, like the non-tender deadline, because pretty much nearly everybody on this team is non-tender eligible. And then you have non-important dates, like when your free agents become free agents again. And it's like, well, that's important because we can sign people, but the Tigers aren't losing anybody this year. We'll talk about that a little bit more too. So just want to take this Friday show and just really kind of roadmap, I guess, the rest of the winter. We'll talk about some individual names as well. And we're going to start off by talking about the trade market that, as I mentioned, opens up immediately after the World Series ends. Dodgers, if you're living under a rock, did defeat the Yankees in 5 games in the World Series. They won in Yankee Stadium. That's really brutal for New York. And a trade happened less than 24 hours after the World Series ended. Griffin Canning for Jorge Soler already happened. I actually really like this deal for the Angels. I'm not a huge Griffin Canning guy, and if you want the full breakdown of that trade, obviously Locked On Angels is legitimately one of the best shows that this network has to offer. So definitely, if you want the Angels perspective, go check that out. If you want the Braves perspective, obviously Locked On Braves, great show as well. But I've never been a big Griffin Canning guy. I don't think Soler solves all of the Angels' problems. But I do think that is somebody who, A, is going to get some pop, fear hitter in that really bad lineup. But I think most importantly, that's the guy that the Angels can flip at the deadline, where I don't think that Canning was ever going to give them a very big return at like a trade deadline or something. Soler's always going to have a market at the trade deadline if he's hitting even remotely well. So I think that gives them a little bit more of flexibility in terms of asset management. there are a lot of other really big names that are going to be rumored in the trade market this year. And so I compiled a little bit of a short list here of players that kind of fill, and like this is all subjective, and some fit more loosely, we'll say, than others, right? They're not all perfect matches necessarily, but there is a little bit of a short list of players that, okay, there is a direct need that would be filled if the Tigers were to acquire them. And it's important to point everybody back to the end of season press conference with AJ Hinch and Scott Harris, where Scott Harris had mentioned, hey, for the first time since I took over, we are going to be in a position where the Tigers can actually trade away prospects and get major league talent. That has not been something that has ever been thrown around in the Scott Harris era. So Yandy Diaz is going to be a big conversation point. The Rays missed the postseason. He put up an MVP caliber season in 2023 and plays first base. So because there's a huge question mark surrounding first base for the Tigers going forward, I think it was fair to put him on this list. Josh Naylor, similar thing. MLB Trade Rumors has Josh Naylor as a potential trade candidate. Cleveland could very much just hold on to him because they are obviously they made the ALCS. They had a fantastic season in the regular season this year as well, and he was a middle of the lineup bat for them. They have no incentive to part ways with him if they don't get a fantastic blow me away offer. Nolan Arenado, someone that was brought up in the mailbag episode last Friday, and I think I would not touch Nolan Arenado with a 10-foot pole personally, just because I think there are underlying injuries. Like his swing has just completely deteriorated. He did not hit well at all. The defense is even not what it used to be. It's still very, very good. Obviously, he's still a huge plus player, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think for the amount of money that you'd have to pay him, you would have to ask the Cardinals to eat some of that, which is going to drive up the price even more, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think the Tigers are going to get Nolan Arenado. Brendan Donovan, someone for the Cardinals that I would love the Tigers to bring in. He plays a lot of different positions, and at points in his career and throughout most of his career has been an OBP machine. The dude just gets on base, high walk rate, seems like a Scott Harris mold type of player. The thing with Donovan is he has multiple years of control still left on his contract. He just has multiple years of team control left, so that is going to cost you a decent amount to bring someone like him in. Also, like he's not going to play second base, I would imagine, but you could move him around the infield or even corner outfield. So we'll see what happens with him. The Cardinals easily could just hold on to him as well. And then Nolan Gorman, who I think has an interesting market. Obviously, the Cardinals are losing some pieces, Paul Goldschmidt, etc. But they have had two pretty disappointing years in a row. And I think that there is a world where they look at Gorman and just go, you know what, like other people in the organization have passed you by. We're going to sign free agents that fit you more, etc. And he could be on the market as well. At his best, could be a big power hitter, but we'll see if that translates over a full season. Brett Baty is an interesting one for the Mets. Struggled when he made his major league debut, and then just kind of like flat out never got a chance to play third base for him. He just lost the third base job. So he's somebody that, again, Tigers really wanted everyday third baseman. If they just think Baty isn't very good, then they won't trade for him. Pretty simple, right? None of these are must do's. This is just the trade market and people that I think might be kind of interesting. But he's someone that was a pretty highly regarded prospect at his peak in the minor leagues. And I'm not sure there's an opening for him to get an opportunity in New York long-term at this point. So that'll be one to keep an eye out for as well. Then obviously you have your big names. Luis Robert, isn't going to play center here, but certainly if you want to have an outfield of Robert, Carpenter, Meadows, Green, that I'm sure people would be pretty fine with that. One of the only good players the White Sox have left. Bo Bichette had a really rough year this year, but obviously fills a need for you and also has had all-star caliber seasons. And then Brent Rooker, who is another, corner outfield type that is going to hit very well, can hit both sides of pitchers, and is somebody that if you are looking for kind of a legitimate outfield bat that can hit lefties, enter Brent Rooker. I think he's going to have a really, really enticing trade market this season. Let's get to the next important date, which is this upcoming Monday. This is where like all of the magic really starts. This is where every single important date over the next like couple of weeks pretty much all happens on November 4th, this upcoming Monday. We'll talk about that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place all of your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets with your first, if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday, keeping the offseason train rolling. We are going to get through the rest of the roster when it comes to our player. I keep wanting to say previews because of the alliteration, but that's what we do in the spring. Player breakdowns based on their 2024 seasons, talk a little bit about what we can expect from them going forward, etc. We will finish that up, but now that we are in the offseason, they're not going to be all in a row anymore. We're not just waiting for the offseason to get here. We are in the thick of it. There's going to be some news, whether it's big or small, nearly every single day for the next few weeks, especially. And that leads us to Monday, November 4th. You have a lot of deadlines that expire on November 4th. So contract options is one of the big ones. So any player, club, mutual, vesting, you name it, any contract option that that is on this calendar year, that is expiring this calendar year, or is due, I should say, this calendar year, you have to make that decision by Monday. The only player in the Tigers organization that affects is Casey Mize, who the Tigers have a club option of $3.1 million for 1 year, being obviously 2025. This was the solution, I guess we'll call it, to all of the drama that surrounded Casey Mize a year ago. How quickly we forget. Last offseason, they were like going to go to arbitration. And then there was like a big argument where they ended up going to arbitration over like $20K or something, which to me is the world. But in terms of, major league contracts is next to nothing, right? Relatively speaking. So I think it might have been like 15K, 10K. Like it was really a minute amount, all things considered. And so this was the solution. They came up with this, we're going to give you a 1-year deal and then give you a club option for a little bit over $3 million the following year. It sounds like, and Evan Petzold of the Freep, as I always give him credit, has done a fantastic job covering this. It sounds like the Tigers are going to decline this club option, but they still have years of control left with Casey Mize. So they are just going to start the process over again and just be right back where they were. Like them declining his club option is not going to make him immediately a free agent and he's just going to get like plucked by another team. They're going to decline the club option and then they are probably just going to sign him to a 1-year deal that is less than the $3.1 million club option. That was basically just a gamble. Like, okay, if he has a really good year and in arbitration he would make more than that, then we'll just bring him back for only 3.1 and save ourselves some money. If he struggles or gets hurt again, etc., and he's going to be worth less than that, then we'll decline it and just rework a new 1-year deal for less than that price tag. And that's what it sounds like they are going to do after his almost 4.5 ERA and then also missing about a month and a half. Well, he got put on the 60-day, actually, so missing about 2 months of the season as well. Those two things together, probably not going to fare too well for him in the arbitration process. So I would imagine they get something done out of the courtroom, we'll say, to be overly dramatic. But after last year's shenanigans, I don't even know. Anything could happen. I have no clue. That was a really weird situation last year, and I'm interested to see how it unfolds this winter. November 4th is also when we have free agency beginning. The Tigers have 0, count them, 0 impending free agents. There's not a single player on this roster whose contract ends. Technically, there's plenty of non-tender guys. Nearly everybody is a non-tender guy on this team, but nobody's contract ends, making them an automatic free agent on November 4th. So that is, I guess, a good thing. I don't know. I'm not really sure if that's like a positive or a negative, but we don't have to worry about anybody. And, there's not any big conversations about re-signing somebody or to big money or anything like that. Everyone is either under contract next year, right? The Kenta Maedas, the Javi Baez's, etc. Or I feel like I said etc. about 50 times this episode. I'm sorry. Or you have the non-tender guys that are just year-to-year arbitration process, stuff like that. Now, when it comes to free agency opening, free agency technically opens immediately after the World Series, but players cannot sign until 5 days after the World Series. For all of you math whizzes at home, that is also November 4th. So let's talk about some of the positions the Tigers are looking to address this offseason, which we have already kind of talked about so far since the Tigers were eliminated, and we will go much more in depth. If you're waiting for give me an episode where we break down why it would be good or bad to sign Christian Walker, we'll have that at some point. We are going to deep dive the free agent market and talk about, the fit for a lot of these players. But just initially, these are some of the best first basemen on the market. There's not even a guarantee the Tigers go after a first baseman. The plan might just be Torkelson and they get kind of a utility guy a la Mark Canha last year that can play first base. But if they are looking to go big and get a legitimate first baseman that they can trust a little bit more, Christian Walker is going to be one of the biggest names on the market. The other one's going to be Pete Alonso. Those are clearly the top two guys there. Other names, Carlos Santana, who's pushing 40 now. Paul Goldschmidt, who had a really kind of up and down season, also is pushing 40. Ryan O'Hearn has a club option, so if that is declined, he'll be a free agent. Justin Turner, who's now playing first base and kind of DHing as well, also 40. Wilmer Flores has a player and so a mutual option. Joey Gallo had kind of a rough year. He has a mutual option. Anthony Rizzo has a club option, also had a pretty rough year for the Yankees. Josh Bell, Rhys Hoskins, who can opt out of his contract, Garrett Cooper, and Yuli Gurriel. So as you can see, there might be some of those names that on an individual basis, every listener's like, oh, maybe them. But the only two names that kind of everybody's looking at and going, all right, if you're going to get a first baseman, bring me one of these two guys, is going to be Pete Alonso and Christian Walker. Everybody else is either really getting up there in years and isn't going to be a long-term option, which I guess maybe the Tigers aren't looking for necessarily, or just kind of didn't have that great of a season to justify really carving out money and a roster spot for them. So that's how first base looks. Second base, we're going to skip over. I will get to Colt Keith's player breakdown later. I think there's a chance they move him around the infield, but I actually think his defense got a lot better. And I think the plan right now is probably some combination of just what they have on the roster, most likely still a lot of Colt Keith for second base next year. Shortstop. No guarantee they sign a shortstop either. We just did our shortstop breakdown earlier this week. Was that literally yesterday? Earlier this week, whenever it was, time just all blends together at this point when you're in the offseason. I think there's a real chance that it's just Trey Sweeney and Javi Baez platooning. But I also want to look at the shortstop free agent market. You have Willy Adames, who had a fantastic season and is 29 years old. Ha-Sung Kim, also 29 years old, has a mutual option, could very well be a free agent this year. Miguel Rojas, 36 years old, has a club option. You have the resurgence of Jose Iglesias, OMG Mania, and all of that with the Mets. He's going to be, obviously, would be a reunion. Paul DeJong, 31 years old, had a kind of okay, I guess, year. Kevin Newman, Ahmed Rosario, and Nick Ahmed. So Yeah, like again, shortstop. If you want to bring me Willie Adames, I'm all ears for that conversation. If you want to talk Ha-Sung Kim, I am all ears. I absolutely love Ha-Sung Kim. But outside of that, I don't need anybody else that I just listed, really. Honestly, at that point, I would rather we just give Trey Sweeney some at bats than like bring in Kevin Newman or soon to be 36-year-old Jose Iglesias. This is another one where it's really the top two guys, and that's kind of it. Let's get to the position you all want to talk about, though, and that is third base. We will do that right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You can toggle the Game Time Picks feature and just have curation make it easier to save more on sports, concert, comedy, theater, etc. They give you your price total all up front. You also have seat views. You can see pictures of your seat before you buy. And obviously, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and more with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time Picks app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, everybody, welcome back. Your third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, speaking of third, we are going to talk third base. Number one on the market for third base is obviously going to be Alex Bregman. He has played with our manager before. He's going to be one of the biggest names in the entire free agent market, regardless of position. He is going to be a huge name. He's 31 years old. He's going to get a long-term deal, probably for a decent amount of money. And it sounds like the Tigers are at least going to kick the tires on it. Does that mean that they're going to, give up the $200+ million that he might end up getting long-term? I don't know. I don't know where Chris Ilitch's head is at with that. I don't know where Scott Harris's head is at with that, but I know that a lot of fans really want to talk Bregman. We will do a full breakdown again at some point this offseason, pretty soon here probably, just to make sure that we have a chance to do the breakdown before he gets signed. And we'll talk about the fit with Alex Bregman, but this team needs a third baseman, and he is objectively the best third baseman on the market. Not too much else needs to be said. Outside of him, you have Eugenio Suarez, obviously would be a reunion as well. JD Davis, Yoan Moncada, Gio Urshela, who obviously played for the Tigers this year, Brian Anderson, and Jace Peterson. There's a few more names down there, but those are kind of the top guys. So that's another position that honestly falls off pretty quickly. Bregman and Suarez, there's a huge gap in production there, but Suarez had a pretty decent year. But again, Suarez to JD Davis, pretty big drop off. Moncada hasn't really played too much the last couple of years. He's been on and off the field, and then you start getting back into Gio Urshela territory after that already. So, that's another one where, like, if you want to talk free agent trade or free agent acquisition rather than trade, if you're one of those people that wants to spend big money, bring me a big name third baseman. It's kind of just like Bregman, or you're getting Eugenio Suarez / JD Davis. And I think there's a big difference in the general public's eyes between their evaluation of those caliber of players. Now, again, there's the trade market, which we talked about. There's some third basemen in the mix there. Outfield. There's a long list of outfielders. There's a ton of outfielders. I'm not going to go through every single outfielder that's on the market, but some of the righties that are going to be out there, especially corner outfield righties on the market. Obviously, Marcell Ozuna has just completely bounced back from the depths of where he was on the field and I guess off the field, and has put together some really good seasons on the field. So he's going to be talked about. JD Martinez, someone the Tigers could have got last year. I'm not sure I want JD Martinez in the field. He didn't have a stellar season. He'll get work, and it'll be a conversation again, but we'll see. Obviously, Juan Soto. I mean, that's almost like I'm laughing as I'm saying that. There's no chance Juan Soto is going to be a Detroit Tiger. Unfortunately, I hate to be the bearer of bad news if you're holding out hope. I would love to be wrong. I would cry. I would literally cry tears on camera if the Tigers signed Juan Soto, but I don't think that's going to happen. And like, you don't have to worry about righty, lefty, whatever. He's just going to hit everyone because he's Juan Soto. He's going to get a ton of money. A name that's been thrown around a lot by the fan base, Anthony Santander, had a great season at the plate this year and is somebody that a lot of people are kind of looking at for that righty power type of corner outfielder. Teoscar Hernandez had a fantastic season. Tyler O'Neill had kind of a bounce back year in Boston. Michael Conforto, Tommy Pham, Rob Refsnyder, if you're looking for a pure platoon option, he is unplayable against righties, but mashes lefties. That's somebody that could fit this Tigers team. We'll talk about him a little bit more later in the offseason because I actually think that might happen. Adam Duvall as well, but he kind of fell off a little bit this year. And then you have a billion starting pitchers as well. Corbin Burns, Garrett Cole, Blake Snell, Kikuchi, Waka, Freddie Peralta, Fried, Evaldi, Jack Flaherty, obviously a reunion there. Nick Martinez, Montgomery, he has a player option. We'll see what happens with him. I'd imagine he takes that, though. Kyle Gibson, Justin Verlander, a lot of people want that. We'll talk about that at some point this offseason. Nick Pivetta, Sean Manaea, Merrill Kelly, and Charlie Morton. And that is only the tip of the iceberg. There is a billion starting pitchers, just like there is a billion relievers. The Tigers are going to be in play for some relievers. Tanner Scott, probably the best one at 30 years old, but Jeff Hoffman, David Robertson, Aroldis Chapman's going to be a free agent again. Clay Holmes, Kenley Jensen, Chris Martin, Carlos Estevez, who kind of had a bounce back season, and then Sean Armstrong as well. Again, tip of the iceberg. There's a ton of pitchers. We will go through a lot more this offseason. So those are some of the names in the positions that the Tigers need. There's a billion free agents, and there's a lot of catchers. We didn't talk about them. Second base, again, center field, I didn't really touch on. A lot more pitchers. There's a lot, but those are kind of the names that jumped out at me on my first real glance at what the Tigers may be looking at this winter. November 4th is also where the 60-day injured list has to be evaporated. For every team, the injured list goes away in the offseason. You have to reinstate everybody, so you can't just like keep somebody on the injured list forever and just get an extra roster spot. At the end of every season, you have to add the players on the 60-man back to your 40-man roster. The Tigers have 39 players on their 40-man roster and 4 players on their 60-day IL. So that means when we talk to each other again on Monday or Tuesday, we are going to be talking about at least 3 cuts that were made. 3 players that are on the 40-man roster right now will not be on the 40-man roster by the end of Monday. Alex Faedo, Sawyer Gipson-Long, Brendan White, and Javi Baez, all on the 40-man roster, all are going to be reinstated. Now, that doesn't mean that for any of these guys that they can't be a casualty of the roster as well. Alex Faedo, I don't think is a guarantee to necessarily last through the winter. Sawyer Gipson-Long, I think, is. Brendan White certainly isn't. Javi probably is. So you have some decisions there as well, like Brendan White, that he may just be the one that's cut. We'll see what happens there. November 4th, also where qualifying offers are due. The Tigers are not going to offer anybody. I don't even know if they have anybody eligible this year. I don't think they do. And we'll talk more about that when we get the list of players in baseball that do have a QO, because Bregman's probably going to get one, and we'll talk about what that means for the Tigers who may sign him. They would lose a draft pick, probably a pretty good one. For signing a guy like Bregman. But there's other players as well. Walker Buehler may or may not get one. There's kind of a laundry list of players that are all eligible for that. November 4th, also minor league free agency. So if you have somebody on that's scheduled to be a minor league free agent, you want to add them to the roster. You kind of have to do that by Monday if you want to, quote unquote, protect them. Now, this is different from the Rule 5 protection date, which is on November 19th. Rule 5 draft happens during winter meetings every year. We will cover that plenty this winter. There is a literal laundry list. It's like 50 names, not actually 50, but it's over 20 names of players that are eligible to be taken in the Rule 5 draft in the Tigers organization this year. we're going to do a whole episode, as we do every winter, just dedicated to, do we protect them or do we not? And then obviously when the Rule 5 draft happens, we will cover that as well. The Rule 5 protection deadline is November 19th. The non-tender deadline is November 22nd. That is pretty much everybody on the roster is going to have to be tendered and chosen to be brought back. But you have some I think Evan Petzold had 9 players that are eligible for arbitration. So those are going to be the big names that we focus on when we get closer to that date. We'll have a whole show dedicated to that. Winter meetings to start December 9th. You have the draft lottery. The Tigers won't be a part of that this year because they made the playoffs. Haha, in case you forgot. And the Rule 5 draft will happen then, etc. Said etc. again. Dang it. Then January, you have arbitration hearings happening in mid and late January. And then in mid-January, you also have the international signing period opening up in the middle of the month for the year 2025. So we will see a ton of the top international prospects that are all like 15, 16, 17 years old, all get almost immediately signed by teams. We will have an entire show dedicated to that as well. It's going to be a busy offseason. We have so much to talk about. It's going to be so much fun. I cannot wait. This is one of the biggest off seasons in the last decade of Tigers baseball. I mean, pretty easily, I would say. And they're trending in the right direction. They had a great year this year. And in order to keep that ball rolling, they have to make a lot of tough decisions this winter. But you know, the best thing about tough decisions is that means your team is actually good and heading in some direction. Now, you got to get a lot of those right. And that's why they pay you a lot of money to make those decisions. But only bad teams have easy off seasons. Or I guess like loaded teams, maybe. But for the most part, really bad teams have easy off seasons. Teams that are trying to get better and trying to push forward, those are the teams that have difficult off seasons, and that's where the Tigers are at. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shots and everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday talking about the offseason. We'll finish up our player breakdowns over the next week or two as well. But a lot of important dates, a lot of news is going to come out of Tigers camp over the weekend and next week. Hopefully I can see you every day here talking about all of that news. We are so back. I cannot wait. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. Hopefully this was kind of a good, again, roadmap. Just, again, this was really base level, surface level stuff. I understand that. But I think it's important to have an episode like this where we lay everything out before we do the deep, kind of more analytical and more deeper dives on everything later in the offseason. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you on Monday, baby. Go Tigers.